Well, thank you very much, Anthony. It's great to be here with so many of you this morning, particularly to Victor. It's great. Victor and I have worked in many different portfolios, and from time to time we've lined up and in our responsibilities, and it's great to be with Victor, and congratulations on the great work you're doing in finance together with Dominic. I heard Dave Elliott was here somewhere, and it's great to have Dave with us, and of course Felicity and James. It's good for you to be joining us here and be supported by the New South Wales team. It's great to be home in New South Wales as well. As Treasurer, you get around the country a fair bit, but it's great to be back home here in New South Wales today to talk to you. In case you're wondering, it is still the most exciting time to be an Australian. It still is, and this room would understand that better than any. That was a true statement when the Prime Minister first said it a few years ago, and nothing has changed because there are exciting things that continue to happen, particularly in your space. It's changing the world, it's changing lives, it's changing our prosperity, it's making an enormous impact. And we know, and you particularly know because you're the professionals in the field, that this whole area, while it contains enormous opportunities, can also be incredibly intimidating to people. And it's very hard for them often to understand the real changes and improvements in living standards that it can deliver for them, and how, when it's harnessed for their purpose, and for their good and their benefit, then there are real big changes that can be made. So we have a collective challenge, whether it's Victor and I in government or you in working in the organisations which you work in, from large companies to small companies to public institutions and public service departments, actually the change agents in harnessing this incredible new technology. We live in a time where the pace of change is nothing short of extraordinary. It's a world where the cycle of change is putting increased power, and this is what I like, it is putting increased power in the hands of consumers and forcing businesses to innovate at speed or lose relevance. While some take technology for granted and others get lost in all the hype, I commend the society, Anthony, for seeing it as a driver of productivity and increased living standards. And importantly, you realise that advances in technology benefit all sectors of the economy, not just your own. Digital technology continues to be a major part of Australia's success as we seek to shift the dial on our productivity agenda. According to the Society's report, Australians are each better off by more than $4,600 per year as a result of the general digital technology update report we have. You can attribute this to many factors: increased productivity of workers and businesses, improvements in the quality of products and services, as well as reduced prices. We welcome these gains, but given the evolving nature of technology, we're not done yet, and I'm sure you're not done yet either. Far from it, in fact. Consultancy firm McKinsey said Australia's digitisation is uneven and still a distance from its full potential. It goes on to say that digitisation could contribute between 140 and 250 billion to Australia's GDP by 2025, based on currently available technology alone. In other words, Australia's performance hinges on our ability, as the intergenerational report said, to absorb technological advances and convert them into new business opportunities. As I told investors at Bloomberg last month, the solution doesn't involve reheating old productivity agendas devised before smartphones and the internet. Instead, the digital economy, now more than 20 years old, demands a national productivity software upgrade of its own. Our challenge is to develop the productivity agenda geared towards the service and knowledge economy while continuing to draw on our strengths in resources, construction or agriculture. Work is underway on several fronts to set the foundations for innovation and growth. And first, I've asked the Productivity Commission to undertake the first of what will be a 5-yearly report on national productivity. This report is intended to serve as a sister act to the intergenerational report and provide the context for the setting of economic policy in Australia, not just at a federal level, but at state and territory level as well. The PC is not just trying to come up with a checklist for governments to achieve, but rather set a new direction that state and territory and Commonwealth governments, we need to populate that agenda with what we're doing. Just simply drawing up lists that have to be ruled in and ruled out through the normal political games that occur in media and so on, that's no way to drive a productivity agenda. And so I'm pleased that the Productivity Commission, who has given me their first report, and we're working through that now as a government, I think has taken a very different approach to trying to set a direction for productivity growth in this country. And I'll have more to say about that in the weeks and months ahead. Secondly, we are delivering on the $1.1 billion National Innovation and Science Agenda, which included delivering tax incentives, which I'm very pleased about, to encourage investment in startups. We are sharing and providing access to more government data by CSIRO's Data 61 unit, which does outstanding work, particularly its most recent work that we funded into blockchain. And we're moving to overhaul our insolvency laws, which put too much focus on penalising and stigmatising business failure, because we know, particularly in this area, you've got to have a few failures before you have some big successes, and our system has to understand and recognise that. We have focused on digital literacy and improving science, technology, engineering and mathematics learning outcomes, the STEM learnings, and we're investing $13 million to encourage more women to choose and stay in the STEM fields. And when we have women in the workforce now at the highest level ever, and participation of women in the workforce at the highest level ever, this is an important development. Thirdly, we've reviewed both our competition and consumer laws to make sure they are fit for purpose in the digital age. And finally, as recently announced, we are developing a digital economy strategy, a roadmap to create a thriving, digitally sophisticated Australian economy. And that work will obviously be greatly assisted by what Anthony said was the PC's report on open data. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about enabling and supporting the digital economy, and how as a nation we go about building on our competitive strengths to drive productivity and raise digital business capability. And Senator Sinodinos said recently about this program, we are not seeking only to respond to change, but we are seeking to create change that is to our benefit. That is the way people will get on board with this. People need to be able to understand, and we need to be able to communicate clearly why this helps them. If it has no utility for them, don't expect them to be interested. We have to be able to explain the benefits, not the features. The benefits is what will sell the change. Improving digital engagement can boost, as I've said, our productivity, but particularly for Australia's small businesses, thereby making our economy stronger, more dynamic and sophisticated. Deloitte's Access Economics found that digitally engaged small business people create more jobs. It said small businesses that reached advanced levels of digital engagement are 1.5 times more likely to be growing revenue and 8 times more likely to be creating jobs compared to those that have basic digital engagement, and 14 times more likely to be innovating. By international standards, Australian businesses are not fast adapters of technology. On a number of different engagement indicators, Australia ranks in the middle of the pack of advanced economies rather than at the front. Those businesses, and we're particularly talking about small businesses here, who may fail to grasp the need to digitise given their specific trade or clientele, are at risk of missing the benefits that such connections bring. Primarily increasing sales by reaching more customers at home and overseas. That's why we've put so much weight on securing trade agreements to open the doors of opportunity, to create the economics of opportunity, particularly for small businesses. Smaller businesses often outshine their larger competitors by providing a more personalised service. Digital technologies can take this to an entirely new level by using data to better understand customer habits and preferences and create greater competition with large businesses. As consumers become more powerful, that's the plan, that's the goal, and businesses look at new ways to get a competitive edge, this is particularly important. Small businesses may also find technology helps them run their business by being able to track their financial health in real time, automate manual and time-consuming processes, or save time in meeting regulatory requirements, and that can, of course, be assisted through a strong RegTech agenda. The benefits stack up, but there are several barriers for small businesses in taking up digital technology. Deloitte found that more than 90% of small businesses are not taking full advantage of today's digital tools. This is of concern to us, with many citing inadequate skills as a barrier to making the most of the web. In an earlier study, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, ran through a list of barriers small businesses see when considering digital communication technologies. This includes information overload, concerns about return on investment, costs, and worries about usability and the need to fit with existing systems. Now, this is completely understandable. When you consider in recent years some tough years for business owners, many operators have had to dip into their own pockets to ensure their business remained open and their staff remained in jobs. So it's hard to think about investing and getting across the challenges a lot of this new technology and the future by digitising your business when you're basically trying to keep the doors open. In pushing the boundaries of opportunity, we are backing Australian small businesses. We are encouraging them to grow and embrace new opportunities. And the proof of that is that this year we have lowered tax for 3.2 million small and medium-sized businesses. They employ 6.7 million Australians. That's more than half the Australian labour force will now be working in businesses that'll be paying less tax because of the tax cuts of the Turnbull government. And we are raising, and I should say, incorporated businesses with an annual turnover of less than 25 million will benefit from a corporate tax rate of 27.5%. That will be the lowest level in 50 years. Now, there's still a long way to go on this front. I mean, the Trump administration has announced their plans to bring it to 20% overnight. We've got the Macron government, which is already on its way to reduce taxes. The UK have already moved. Singapore's already there. Ensuring that Australia's tax system is internationally competitive for investment is a critical goal of the Turnbull government, and one we're following through on, and we call on the Australian Parliament and particularly the Australian Labor Party to go back to what they first believed when Paul Keating was a Treasurer and understand that tax cuts are good for jobs, they're good for growth, they're good for business, they're good for living standards. In addition to that, we're also giving breathing space through the extending the 20,000 instant asset write-off to the 30th of June of next year. This initiative, as many of you will know, has provided small businesses with an opportunity, now up to 10 million in turnover. It used to be 2, we increased the threshold to 10, to invest in their business by immediately writing off the costs of purchasing machinery and equipment costs less than $20,000 each. And indeed, some businesses may access the instant asset write-off when they purchase new hardware or technology. It's been a key item that has been used to take advantage of that initiative. Indeed, on top of that, we have made it easier for smaller businesses to compete for the government's ICT contracts. There's more work to do there. But recent ICT procurement reforms, which cap contracts to a maximum of 100 million or 3 years duration, will benefit SMEs who will have the opportunity to bid for smaller individual components of larger government projects. In the area of cybersecurity, where I know you've spent a lot of time, we provide grants of up to 2,100 to co-fund small businesses to have their cybersecurity resilience tested by the CREST ANZ approved service providers. And many of you will be interested to know that our strategy also extends to building a stronger cybersecurity industry in Australia, and you'll be well aware that the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Cybersecurity, Dan Tehan, announced $30 million to fund a new cybersecurity growth centre. Industry experts are driving the centre's work in ensuring Australia has a foothold in a global industry which is expected to grow to $200 billion by 2020. The government also needs to make life easier for businesses by using technology to cut red tape. Time is money, and to remove the level of government hoop jumping, we've set up a digital transformation agency and the National Business Simplification Initiative. Believe it or not, it can take up to 18 months to set up a cafe here in New South Wales. People need to complete up to 48 forms and comply with up to 75 different regulations across different levels of government. But under the banner of a simplification initiative, and I acknowledge the work of Craig Laundy in doing this, we're working closely with the New South Wales government. It's a great partnership between the Liberal coalition government here in New South Wales and the one in Canberra to reduce this burden. And combined with other services and measures by Services New South Wales, we're looking to reduce that set-up time from 18 months to just 3. That's what happens when governments will work together and start solving these very practical problems. And I want to thank the Premier and the whole team here in New South Wales for the very enthusiastic way they've embraced that initiative and working together with us. Now, I'm passionate about many things. I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about the Cronulla Sharks. We have 3 more days to be called the reigning premiers. We'll all be a bit glum come Monday. I'm passionate about Tina Arena. She had a great concert on the weekend, enjoyed it very much, but I tell you, I'm passionate about Fintech. as those in the fintech sector know. We call it in my office the happy place. When things are a bit tough, we start talking fintech. Fintech is another dynamic area where the Turnbull government has been methodically positioning Australia as a world leader. The fintech revolution is an uprising The Economist heralded by saying the magical combination of geeks in t-shirts and venture capital that has disrupted other industries had put financial services in its sights. Now, I don't need a beard or a t-shirt to be excited about fintech. I know how it works and I know the opportunity it brings. This revolution is offering consumers and businesses the chance to benefit from new services and products, providing them with greater choice through increased competition and efficiency across the financial system. On another level, we see the fintech startups and entrepreneurs are more nimble in their use of technology, which is giving them a fighting chance against established and traditional businesses. But we're also seeing that now occur not just as a disruption, but as a collaboration between large businesses and the fintech disruptors. And this is not just happening in Australia, it's actually happening all around the world. It starts off with that very, upstarty disruption attitude and culture, which is a good thing. But I think the response from large businesses, and I'll pay credit to the banks, don't fall over, I'll pay credit to the banks that we've been working with them on this for some time. And what started off as a real, threat, has now been embraced for one particular reason: it's good for the customer. And at the end of the day, businesses are about the customer first and foremost. And there's a coming together, in the fintech sector between large and small firms alike in doing what's best for the customer. Fintech is one of the fastest growing sectors in our global financial services industry, with a total investment of almost $25 billion US in 2016. Early this month, I travelled up to Beijing to lead our representation at the Strategic Economic Dialogue with the Chinese government, and we met with major Chinese firms who are investing in Australia. And among the encouraging signs of China's pursuit of sustainable economic growth, the prudency at which it is addressing its debt, there are still challenges there, and its continuing openness to trade and investment, which is setting a global standard. It's the pace of digital change within its economy, which is just absolutely breathtaking. While many consider London, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, even Australia as fintech frontrunners, China is just powering ahead. Powering ahead. Digital disruption has been a king for the Chinese consumer, presenting them with a range of mobile payment platforms, mobile lending, peer-to-peer credit that has enabled more than 400 million Chinese, or 65% of its mobile users, to use their phones as their wallet, which is the highest rate in the world. While China is the emerging giant in this space, I'd argue, in this space, providing innovative all-in-one fintech platforms that sync with social media accounts, evidence shows that Sydney and Melbourne are holding their own. The Global Financial Centres Index saw both Sydney and Melbourne featuring within the top tier of fintech and financial services destinations. Recent results also show that Australia is now the second largest alternative finance market in the Asia Pacific, with the market now reaching some US $610 million in 2016. And the number of fintech startups in Australia has increased from less than 100 in 2014 to 579 companies in July of 2017. That's why I'm excited about the tax incentives for angel investing in new startups. When you see numbers like that, you can see that there are startups that are out there looking to make things happen in this space, and that is a rapid growth in those sorts of take-up figures. The Australian fintech landscape is increasingly diversified, picking up credit, payments and digital currencies, and extending to include regtech, data and analytics, and personal financial management. And as we've come to expect, Australia is punching above its weight. 8 of our companies made the 2016 list of the world's 100 leading fintech innovators. And according to KPMG, investment in Australia's fintech industry hit a new high in 2016, with $656 million US invested across 25 deals. This is especially pleasing when measured against a backdrop of falling global fintech investment. What's more, the positive trend in Australia's fintech investment has continued in the first half of this year. With Australian fintechs effectively competing on the global stage, we do need to do more to unlock their potential. Case in point is our ASIC regulatory sandbox to support fintechs as they find their feet in a commercial world, combining tax incentives with regulatory concessions to ensure that they can get up and away. That sandbox allows entrepreneurs to test specified new products and service without a financial service licence while still subject to consumer protection obligations. And as I've already announced, the Turnbull government will move to legislate an enhanced regulatory sandbox to enable more firms to take advantage of this world-leading initiative. This will make it, arguably, I would say it is, the forward-positioned regulatory sandbox for fintech in the world. On top of that, we have a solid home ground advantage with Australian consumers adopting fintech at a rapid rate. We're currently ranked 5th on the EY Fintech Adoption Index, putting us ahead of key markets in Singapore and Hong Kong. Australia's high ranking means we're an attractive market to launch and expand fintech products. Another factor holding us in good stead is that more than 40,000 information and communications technology professionals ply their trade in the financial sector. Many of you are here today. Your skills are obviously in high demand, with the financial services industry climbing from 12th in 2015 to 4th in 2016 on the list of industries with the largest share of ICT job advertisements. Now, this partly reflects the fact that established firms are not sitting eating dust while fintech rides off into the sunset. As the competition review panel predicted, new entry exerts a positive discipline on existing market players, encouraging them to be more innovative and responsive to consumer needs. So consumers stand to benefit, with the major banks swinging into action to set up their own innovation hubs, some of which I've visited, and incubators, and enter into fintech partnerships and collaborations. The World Economic Forum's paper confirmed this trend. It found fintechs have materially changed the basis of competition and financial services, but have not yet materially changed the competitive landscape. So more to do. Importantly, the forum said fintechs have shown the customer experience bar set by large technology firms can be met in financial services. Now, to fuel this competitive dynamic, we need to double down on our efforts to allow fintechs to make a mark. To help with this task and set the best course of action, my Fintech Advisory Group has been holding me up to the line on this. The group provides advice on our policy actions and ensures fintech priorities are front of mind. Views of this group have informed our approach to extending the crowdsource equity funding to proprietary companies, to building on the CSEF framework for public companies, which commences tomorrow. CSEF will open up new capital markets for small businesses and startups who may face difficulty accessing traditional sources of funding. We're also knocking down barriers that restrict authorised deposit-taking institutions with less than $50 million in capital from using the term bank. We are lifting this restriction to encourage innovative new players to enter the market. APRA is also considering a phased approach to licensing new entrants to the banking industry, to have our own challenger bank framework. This means fintechs can potentially apply to start on a restricted licence while they develop the resources and capabilities to meet the prudential framework. Turnbull government is also removing a tax obstacle, making it easier for innovative digital currency businesses to operate in Australia. We will no longer have a situation, it's amazing that we did, where if you purchased software worth $100 Australian dollars in digital currency, you ended up paying double GST. Now, states might have liked that, doubling down on the GST, but they'd agree it's not a good way to run your economy, double taxing. So $10 in GST to purchase the digital currency, plus $10 in GST on the purchase of the software. Now, we've got rid of that. I introduced that legislation in the last week we were in Parliament. And as that moves through the Parliament, that'll come off. And so purchase from digital currency from 1 July 2017 will no longer be subject to the GST. And the local fintech industry also benefits from the broader NISA agenda, and this includes the Launchpad initiative where Australia's rising stars can learn from the best and brightest innovators from around the world. For example, again, in collaboration with the New South Wales Government, a group of Australian fintechs this month travelled to our Launchpad in Tel Aviv for an intensive boot camp. In a world where data is everywhere and everything, an open banking regime provides the building blocks for fintechs in Australia, and in response to several reviews and inquiries, the Turnbull government is taking action to provide banking customers with greater access to and control over their data. Customers will be able to request their data be provided to third parties such as fintechs so they can potentially be offered better, more suitable services. I've put another independent review with a mandate to recommend a model for open banking in Australia, a regulatory framework and a roadmap and timetable for its implementation. And I've asked the review to provide advice on the scope of the banking data sets to be shared and who the data should be shared with. This review is due to report by the end of the year, which will also consider customer usability, trust, security of data, liability and privacy safeguard requirements. The open banking inquiry will be the first cab off the rank, or I suppose the first Uber to turn up. Not in the UK anymore, but to really, I think, get this issue of consumer data rights right. And once we're able, I think, to define consumer data rights and then an open data framework in the banking sector, well, the opportunities in all other sectors open up. We can't rush at this, we've got to get it right. You all know better than anyone the complexities of this and the risks of this and how you've got to get it right, whether it's a large bank, a small bank. But the application, whether it's in telecommunications, whether it's in energy in particular, I mean, the ability to empower customers in highly regulated markets where oftentimes it's the complexity of that regulation that works against them and not for them. It works for the big companies, not for the consumer. Data sharing, open data, puts the customer, puts you back at the centre of the system. And this is why we're so passionate about it. And the Open Banking Review will be the first opportunity for us to really go down this path in a very serious way. So in finishing, let me thank the Australian Computer Society, Anthony, for hosting today's breakfast. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very pleased, as you can probably see, to speak about the digital technology and its importance to the Australian economy. As did the ACS, as the ACS is fond of saying, digital technology is driving some of the biggest changes in our era. Technology is there at the start of our day, it will be there at the end of the day, and we need to make the most of it during our day and to improve our productivity every day. To grow, we need small businesses firing on all cylinders in particular. We need them creating jobs and taking on new digital opportunities. And as well as allowing businesses to deliver better customer experiences, digital technologies have enabled new business models and driven internal business transformation, and Fintech is a great example. Thank you very much for your invitation today and for listening to me so patiently. And read the big games on the weekend. Good luck, Cowboys. Cheers. Thanks.
Happy to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Treasurer has kindly agreed to take a couple of questions. We're probably only going to have time for 3, so if I could ask, rather than statements, to keep it short and straight to the point. But a show of hands, we've got roving microphones.
Morning, Scott. Philip Archie, past president of the ACS.
Hello.
Government procurement, as you know, can have a big influence on startups. And historically, we've railed against the old way of doing government procurement. Can we please have some innovation evaluation office somewhere in government where Aussie innovators can say, hey, look at us. And you can say, I wonder if we can utilise this anywhere in government, do a little pilot test, and then simply put them on the list of, hey, if you've got a need for this, go have a look at these little Aussie innovators, because you just don't get a look in any other way. And the probity rules and the regulatory regime, absolute total barriers. You know, bids that say proven solutions only, you can't do that anymore. You're dealing government out of all the productivity gains of innovation the minute you say that. Something to think about.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I think they're good suggestions. I think what I outlined in my statements is we're moving further down that path. I mean, these issues are challenging for governments. I mean, we're managing public money, and so probity issues and all of these processes, of course, they're important. But we also don't want to lock out the public from the benefits of the digital inventions that are being developed every day. And the government sector, whether it's in defence or whether it's in human services, in our massive payment platforms, the way we deliver childcare subsidies to individuals. I mean, these are very big digital tasks, and we do need the best ideas in these areas. And whether it's Alan Tudge in the human services portfolio, or Christopher Fine in the defence industry sector, or Greg Hunt in health, or myself in Treasury, and Matthias Cormann, who looks after procurement. We are constantly working more towards that goal that you've mentioned, Philip. I think you're right about that. I'd like to get there quicker, because when I spend time, I've talked a fair bit about Fintech today, but when I spend time in that sector and I can see what's happening, here's a good example on RegTech. It is possible now to write your entire council planning code in code, and you could submit technically DAs and BAs in CAD and have real-time approvals. Just imagine how much time that would save. When developers have often said to me, oh, this takes all too long, we need to get these projects going, I said, well, go and invest in a fintech startup which will develop that for a council. If the technology is there to do it. Now, that's not taking away any decision from anybody. It's right that the councils and indeed the state government will set what the rules are, but the rules can't be then used as an arbitrary way of bureaucratic opposition. And I think technology can cut through that. And the productivity savings of that alone are mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. So I think that's one example, but it's very hard to see those things get adopted.
Another question? Simon.
Simon Foster from Squirrel Street. I've got a question about regulation going the other direction, particularly R&D tax incentive. There's recently been a crackdown on software developers, the imposition on regulation to be able to claim that, which is a terrific program, and it supported a lot of startups over the number of years. But the claim we just completed last year took a couple of weeks, this year took 2 months. And I understand you've got to be able to make sure people are complying properly, but the regulation on something that's really supporting industry has gone the wrong direction. What's your view on that?
I think I'd agree with you. I think the R&D tax system, which has been in place for some time, is not hitting the marks of who it's supposed to be helping and who it's supposed to be encouraging. Everyone in this room knows that there are firms, it's called grave digging. You go back and make claims for R&D concessions of things that were done up to 10 years ago. What's the additionality in that? Nothing. And what the R&D tax credit system should be doing is driving additionality of innovation within firms, and particularly for those firms for whom they are doing things that are not business as usual, but what you're talking about, which is developing new technology, not just the ordinary run of what you do as a business. I mean, the incentives are supposed to get things happening that wouldn't ordinarily otherwise happen, and that governments believe is a good thing for the economy. And I think there are some real weaknesses in that system.
Thank you. One more?
I should stress that there's been a pretty significant review undertaken by the Chief Scientist and the Treasury Secretary, and others have been looking at this issue pretty carefully.
Hi, my name's Catherine Bennett. I'm from Optus Business. With innovations like flying cars, drones, robotics, what's the government doing around regulation with our aerospace?
On aerospace, like any new area of technology, one of the challenges government has, and the same is true with the tax space, by the way, it takes a while for the government to sort of catch up. I mean, over the last 2 years, we've introduced, I'm going to use tax as an example because your area is quite specific. But in tax, for example, we've had to deal with what has been a pretty significant shifting in the tax base, not just here in Australia, but all around the world. The provision of digital services and all of these sorts of things. And so a big part of why we've been successful with the multinational anti-avoidance legislation, the diverted profits tax, the digital services tax, the low value threshold reduction, which comes in on the 1st of July of next year. All of that is basically governments, not just here, but around the world, catching up with how the tax base has shifted with the impact of digital technologies. And so these things have to be done not just in isolation. We need to work with other countries around the world. And so we're very keen to hear about how these things are also being regulated overseas. Now, we're not intuitive regulators, and with a lot of new technologies, it's a little hard to, I think, assess too far ahead about what the risks are you're trying to protect against. And you've got to be very careful with regulation in that space that you're not crippling the technology before it even gets out of the pen. And to give you some proof of that is our view, that's why I mentioned the regulatory sandbox for fintech operators. I mean, we get it that we have to provide protections for consumers who might go and engage with those service providers. I mean, it is for consenting adults if you're going to go and deal with a fintech provider who's in the regulatory sandbox. But at the same time, we've created a regulatory environment where they can get it right and then move forward. But the other thing that does is that also helps the regulators, because they've worked out through the process of development what are the things you've got to be careful of and what are the things that you don't have to be careful of. Now, to be fair to regulators, and I have quite a few who work for me, whether it's in the tax office through Kelly O'Dwyer or the APRA or ASIC or any of these groups, you know, something goes wrong and everybody's knocking on their door as to how did you let that happen? And, you know, the drone crashed into a schoolyard and injured a child or something like this. So, to be fair to them, they're going to have a naturally cautious approach to this. So we do have to come up with, I think, quite collaborative ways about how you pre-position regulation. And the sector has a huge job to play in this. I mean, you know how the technology works. You actually know what the risks are, probably better than the regulators do. And it's important that you're upfront with them about what they are, because they're just simply trying to protect people. That's their job. Your job is to excite them and give them great products and services and change their world. Their job is to keep them safe. And those two jobs have to intersect.
Hello. Thank you, Treasurer. Michael Sharp from the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. We're seeing some great changes in manufacturing across the nation. You mentioned the launch pads earlier. Could you tell us a bit more about what's happening with that initiative?
Well, I don't have a lot more information available to me this second as to what beyond what I outlined in my statement, and I'd encourage you to go to the new strategy and the website for that, and all those details will be there. But I am excited about what is happening more in advanced manufacturing. I mean, it's a bit like with regional Australia. People say, oh, you know, things are really tough in regional Australia. Well, they are in many parts of regional Australia. That's true. Particularly those parts of regional Australia that are going through quite significant industrial transformation. Very tough. But there are other parts of regional Australia who are doing great. You know, go to Tamworth, go to Toowoomba, go places like that. Go where the better prices that we've seen for beef and things like that, and you can see it in the main streets. And so there's not one story. And the same is true with manufacturing. While we have seen declines in areas of manufacturing, we've seen great growth in others. And I think we have to be careful when we talk about manufacturing that we don't make it a one-size-fits-all story, because for advanced manufacturing, I think there's great excitement and optimism. And I think Australia has you know, great opportunities there. And this is one of the reasons why we've got the record investment in defence industry procurement. I mean, our defence industry plan is obviously designed to build our capability for our defence forces, the biggest recapitalisation of our defence forces since the Second World War, to get it back up to 2% of GDP, which we will reach. But the kick-on benefits of supporting advanced manufacturing and the supply chain for defence industries around this country is enormous. And I've seen it, everything from circuit board manufacturers to those providing advice or components of advanced weapon systems and things like this. I mean, the story of the US's technology development, much of it goes off the back of big defence and security contracts. Why? Because they're solving incredibly complex problems, and they need very smart people with great technology to solve those problems. And they work out that it can be used for that guidance system, and the next thing you know, they've found a very relevant consumer application as well. But the intense R&D that had to go into solving the defence problem or the IT security problem for a major government installation or something like that, then can quickly flow. And this is why, when people hear the Australian government talking about our investments in defence, by all means, you should feel safer because of our commitment to defence spending in this country. But if you work in advanced manufacturing in this country, also feel great because it's benefiting your job and your sector as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Treasurer's been very generous with his time this morning. Can we please say thank you?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Just as the Treasurer says goodbye to a few people, in terms of upcoming ACS activity, we should have a slide, our Reimagination Thought Leaders Summit. So Treasurer's talked about a lot of the exciting things happening in Fintech. As part of our Australia's Digital Pulse report, we talked about the real need to double down and create greater digital ecosystems. A lot of thought leaders in attendance. We'd really appreciate your thoughts coming along and starting that conversation of how we can expedite our digital transformation. Thanks for joining us this morning. That'll be the end of our live stream. Time to network with your peers, but thanks once again. Testing ideas and sharing with each other, people are the drivers of innovation, is a really important aspect of what today's all about.
This technological advancement, this presents challenges to some category of worker. And over again, we're seeing that the workers who are facing the greatest challenge are those right there in the middle.
Trying to convince both my cabinet colleagues, but to then drive the change through the bureaucracy was a very significant challenge.
It's about using the power of the machine that you have, keeping it efficient, making sure that your board is right, making sure that your executive management is right, and making sure that all of the talent that sits underneath that is also right.